On this episode of Hill City Happenings, we learn more about public works and how they respond to emergencies in our city. Also, we learn more information about the Lynchburg City Schools facility study. Coming up next. I'm your host, Shaquille Cook, and this is Hill City Happenings. From the maintenance of streets and sidewalks to ice and snow removal, Public Works goes the extra mile to keep our city safe. Let's talk to Ms. Gaynell Hart to learn more information about what they do.
Well, let me start with the Streets Division. The Streets Division does just your basic street maintenance, repairing potholes, repairing shoulders, doing drainage activities, those kind of things this time of year. We also, year-round, are picking up litter along the highways and in our neighborhoods, so that's a constant battle. In the fall, we're working on leaf collection. We offer leaf collection to all citizens in the city. That activity takes place usually from November through January, February, and those leaves are actually hauled away and are used to compost here locally. Then obviously in the winter we've got snow removal operations and other operations that we perform in the winter. So we've been very lucky recently not to have a lot of snow, but typically we've got snow removal call outs and the guys they're operating spreaders. We are able to pre-treat our roads, so we'll have apply brine if we think a storm is coming. So that's your basic services that we provide out of the Streets Division. Well, in Public Works, as I mentioned, we've got 5 divisions, and when there's an emergency, it's all hands on deck, so everybody can be involved, from somebody that answers the telephone up to our engineering division. Most recent storm, our response was, with the heavy rains and getting about 9 inches of rain in a short amount of time, we had streets flooded, so we went around and barricaded streets so people would not drive through water and potentially stall their vehicles out or become injured or trapped. We actually responded to many downed trees that are blocking the roads, and if Appalachian Power is not involved, we clear those and move them to the side so people can get through. So that was our most recent response in terms of the 9-inch rain. And we actually had 2 roads that are even continue to be closed now, 12th Street and Horsford Road. We had some major erosion and slides into the road, and we're still working on cleaning that up. And that's where our engineering division comes in. They're actually helping us assess those banks and determine what we need to do to stabilize those banks and make sure it's safe before we open those roads to the traveling public. So those are some of the responses that we had in the most recent heavy rains. We respond to many types of storms. I mean, from a minor thunderstorm to what we just had recently. Typically in a snow removal operation, we just watch the weather. We will load up our spreaders ahead of time and be prepared and ready to go so that when the storm starts, we just jump in the spreader, put the salt in the spreader, and take off. We also, as I mentioned, we do have the ability to pre-apply brine to the road. And a lot of times if we see it's not going to rain before it starts snowing or sleeting, we apply brine in hopes that we can create a nice brine underneath the snow so it will not freeze to the pavement. So those are some things we do in snow removal. A typical thunderstorm, we actually have people on call 24/7, and they're in many different areas, but they're on call in streets and grounds. We have someone on call for buildings, and we have someone on call for traffic engineering and traffic signal problems. So sometimes when there's a storm or a thunderstorm or a flood, all 3 of those people get called out and then need backup from other public works crews to come in and assist. In a major storm, we have an emergency operations center, and we will open that up, and that assists us with communications with the citizens as well as communications with the 911 operators and 911 call takers. And so we're able to facilitate our services better along with police and fire through communications with 911. We work very closely with communications and public engagement, and so we will write up press releases, or we're available to do interviews at any time if there's something going on where we need to get some news out to the public. That's our primary resource to get news to the public, is through communications and public engagement. And of course they use all their resources, social media, press releases, just anything that they have available to them to get the word out. We're really proud to be able to touch every part of this community. We feel like we touch everybody every day, and we appreciate the citizens, and their patience with us at times. Sometimes we're in the middle of the road and we're kind of causing you traffic hazards or whatever, but we just appreciate your cooperation and support as we provide services to everybody.
Lynchburg City Schools has been working diligently and listening to community input for the upcoming facilities master plan. Let's talk to Dr. Reed Woldicott to find out more information about it.
So really the purpose of the facility study, as we've been working through it, has been to develop a vision and a path forward and what the future will look like for what our schools look like in the city of Lynchburg. I think that the role that schools play in our community, in this community, really helps to create what is our community, right, and how we define it. And so as we go through this process, what we understand is that schools in our community, or schools in the city, shouldn't be separate. Schools are a critical part of our community and how we build it. And so the process is that we've been working through with this master plan is really about crafting a path forward, crafting a vision for where the schools need to be in the future. That of course means conversations about physical facilities that we have, so which schools are where and what schools do we invest in. But probably as important or more important is a conversation about the larger picture of the programmatic perspective of our school division. How are we going to focus in on the programming in our buildings, and then how do we use our buildings to support that as best we possibly can. So it's really this sort of all-encompassing sort of global perspective on what school buildings should look like in Lynchburg now and well into the future, and really taking a lot of time to really plan through that process, I think helps us to figure out how it is that we make the investments in the right place. When we think about Lynchburg City Schools, Lynchburg City Schools are not my schools, they're not your schools, they are all of our schools. And everyone who is in our community should have and has the opportunity to have a voice in the process going forward. So as we cast this vision to what our schools will look like now, 10, 15, 20 years from now, it's really important that all of us who have a stake in the school division, which really is everyone, has that voice. So these open houses that we've had are really just one part of our engagement process that we've had in our master plan. We've been doing this for quite some time, really starting with our community conversations really well over a year ago, where we've had conversations with folks in our community about what the direction we're going is. We've had a number of other community sort of feedback sessions and lots of community surveys and those sorts of things as we continue through this process. And so it's been tremendously valuable to hear from our community to see kind of what they think about some ideas that we're presenting. Are we on the right track? Are we not on the right track? Where do we need to kind of shift that focus? And that's great, and that's why the process exists the way that it does. And so again, this is really something that is really, really important to make sure that we can ultimately make the best decisions we possibly can. Because if without that community feedback, then you're sort of doing it in a vacuum, and we don't want to do that. So these are, as you can imagine, these are very complex questions. And so we've had a lot of conversations about elementary schools. That's sort of the information that we've published so far, and that's the information that we've given in the open houses, as well as the information. But we also, of course, have recommendations that will come about for our middle schools and our high schools that are focusing really heavily in on preparing people for the workforce and college and whatever comes beyond their K-12 education. So we think there is a vision that we can cast, and certainly we're having lots of conversations about elementary schools, and we'll continue forward with that. Where we will go, I don't ultimately know the decision, right? Because it's not my decision. It ultimately will be the school board's decision in partnership with our city council as they think through how funding decisions will be made and that sort of thing. What our process is from a staff is to ensure that the process occurs in a way that's inclusive that has as many voices as possible so that we can provide our policymakers, those are our elected officials and our school board members, with as much information about the community's perspective as we possibly can. So there's that component. There's also, of course, the educational outcomes and the utilization kind of component. So what we'll be able to do in each building if we make different changes and different decisions, and ultimately how efficiently will we use the buildings so that we make sure that we are investing our resources, that is of course time, that's our money, and that is our human resources, into the right places, right? Because that's ultimately what a lot of this plan is about, because we have, as every community does, we have limited resources, and when we make investments, we want to make sure that we are making them the best way possible. And so because these are so complex, such complex questions, there's lots of different factors that roll into that. And so what we try to do is just have as much information as we possibly can. And then we know that our elected officials, as well as our school board members, will make the best decisions we possibly can.
Well, that wraps up this episode. Till next time, I'm your host, Shaquille Cook, and this is Hill City Happenings.